Hello, and welcome to our ICAPS 2020 talk on computing good policies to adaptively gather information when provided with multiple complementary sensor modalities. Resource-constrained information gathering is crucial for several real-world robotics applications, such as disaster search and rescue, unknown terrain exploration, and environmental monitoring. For most settings, the agents typically have multiple sensor modalities, through which they receive noisy world observations. On a limited energy budget, agents must balance exploring the environment through sensing and exploiting the current belief to move to useful locations. Informative path planning, or IPP, represents problems where agents must navigate from start to goal under a cost budget while visiting intermediate locations of maximum utility along the way. Even the non-adaptive setting, where agents plan once and need not account for noisy observations, is NP-hard. Adaptive IPP adds another layer of difficulty by requiring a policy that responds to the agent's observations. Prior work has studied the adaptive setting with utility function assumptions of submodularity and locality, as hypothesis identification in metric spaces, and as imitation learning of an oracle over a distribution of possible environments. However, none of these works explicitly consider sensing as part of the decision space in addition to moving, let alone accommodating multiple distinct sensor modalities. In contrast, we explicitly extend the adaptive IPP formulation to allow the agent to modulate sensing to conserve its limited energy. The upper panel of this illustrative example shows how in the traditional adaptive IPP setting, the agent continues to sense despite sufficient information about the utility of the next location. The lower panel shows how in our more general setting, the agent can directly move to the next location without expensive sensing actions. Our key idea is to reason jointly about multimodal sensing and movement by formulating the problem as a partially observable Markov decision process, or POMDP, and using an online solver to accommodate the large state space. To effectively guide the online simulations, we use a tailored rollout policy. Our experiments will demonstrate how our approach outperforms a prior adaptive IPP algorithm extended to multimodal sensing, and how this tailored rollout is key to performance. The standard adaptive IPP formulation has a graph of discrete location nodes that agents can visit and start and goal nodes. Each node has some true underlying state that represents the utility that the agent accrues on visiting it for the first time. For example, a high, medium, or low density of survivors. The edges are weighted with the energy cost of traversing it. The agent also has a suite of sensors that it can use to get noisy observations about the surrounding nodes. For example, a more energy expensive but precise HD camera, and a cheaper but noisier time of flight sensor. Given the overall battery constraint, the agent can only visit a few locations, so judicious sensing is key to determining which locations are more useful. The POMDP formulation follows naturally from the overall problem. At any time step, the system state is the agent's current location, set of visited nodes, and remaining energy. The true state of unvisited nodes is hidden. The set of actions is the union of neighbor nodes of the current location and all sensing actions. Transitions are deterministic and encode the agent moving and the energy expended due to sensing or moving. The observations are noisy sensor-dependent readings of the adjacent locations. And finally, rewards are only obtained as the marginal utility of moving to unvisited locations. Given the reachability in this problem due to the graph connectivity and the exponential size of the state space in the number of nodes, we use online POMDP planning to solve our problem. We build upon the influential and general online solver POMCP, which uses particle filters to track the belief state over observation histories and runs the upper confidence trees algorithm. In POMCP, a rollout is used to estimate the value of a leaf node in the search tree. For most large problems, the choice of rollout policy can greatly impact POMCP's performance. Our rollout policy is based on the generalized cost-benefit algorithm, which itself solves for the fully observable IPP problem where node utilities are all known in advance. The key idea is quite intuitive. We greedily choose the next option or action that maximizes the ratio of expected marginal utility or benefit to the energy expended or cost. At any location, our set of actions is the union of all movements to neighbors and all sensing actions, as we said before. For the movement actions, the cost-benefit ratio of moving to a neighbor is simply the expected additional utility given the current belief of its underlying state divided by the energy cost of traversing the edge. Sensing actions have no explicit utility with respect to the true reward function, but we incentivize them in rollout with a simple information theoretic reward that basically maximizes in expectation the mode of the belief state. Having computed the expected cost-benefit ratio for all actions, the rollout policy samples from a softmax distribution over them. Please see the paper for the other details of our approach. To evaluate our approach, we use two distinct simulated domains inspired by real applications and introduced on previous work on informative path planning and POMDPs. In search and rescue, a number of survivors are scattered across some unknown terrain. Each location or node has a high, medium, or low number of survivors, depending on its accessibility. When the agent visits a location, it rescues the survivors stranded there. The second domain, information search rock sample, models a rover exploring a grid world terrain. Some of the cells contain rocks, some of which are good, that is, provide high utility when visited and sampled, and the others bad or of no utility. There are also beacons in certain cells, and only from the beacons can the agent take sensing actions to get observations about nearby rocks. As a baseline, we extend Singh et al.'s non-myopic adaptive IPP algorithm, or NAIVE, as an acronym, not as an adjective. This consists broadly of iterative Bayesian updating and replanning with an orienteering method in the loop. We also compare against POMCP with a random rollout as an ablation. For search and rescue, we varied the relative proportion of high, medium, and low utility locations and computed the average utility over 30 trials for each. Overall settings, POMCP GCB outperforms both baselines. It improves only modestly over random, but that gap will increase on the next domain, as we'll see. Notably, the highest relative gap to naive is in the first row, where high utility locations are least prevalent. This suggests that POMCP balances sensing and movement more effectively than modified naive, especially when identifying which states are of higher or lower utility. Now, on information search rock sample, we found that naive accrued little to no reward on most trials. This finding is not surprising given the more challenging domain, where explicitly reasoning about the trade-off between multimodal sensing and movement is key for good performance, and this really provides empirical justification for extending adaptive IPP to account for multimodal sensing. We compared the two rollout strategies over settings with varying numbers of rocks and beacons in a 10x10 grid world, and varying probability of each rock being good. Once again, GCP outperforms random across all settings with a higher relative performance gap than in search and rescue. Note two other observations. First, the relative performance gap of GCP to random increases with more good rocks. Second, with more beacons, the relative gap is as good or better, which suggests that the GCP rollout makes better use of environmental information to find good locations. To recap briefly, we extended the adaptive IPP problem to incorporate multimodal sensing actions and embraced online POMDP planning as a means to jointly reason about sensing and movement. Our tailored adaptive greedy rollout policy was key to good performance. Future work could address some of our limitations, a rigorous analysis under modeling assumptions, studying other state-of-the-art POMDP solvers, and extending the formulation to more complex utilities and costs. All right, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and comments.